Native American hygiene, who were the real savages? Picture this, it's November 1620. The Mayflower creaks into Plymouth Harbor after 66 days at sea. European pilgrims stumble off that floating petri dish, reeking like a medieval dungeon that's been marinating in its own filth for 2 months. They haven't bathed since, well, maybe never. Their teeth are black stumps rotting out of their skulls. Their clothes are caked with vomit, urine, and things we don't want to think about. They smell like death had a baby with a garbage fire. And then they meet the Wampanoag people. Clean. Fresh. Teeth that actually function. Skin that doesn't look like it's actively decomposing. Actually pleasant to be around without a gas mask. So naturally, the Europeans took one whiff of the situation and declared, "These people are savages." Yeah. The clean people were the savages. Makes perfect sense, right? Welcome to last night's story, where we dig up the dirty truth about history's cleanest cover-up. The Squanto situation. Let's talk about the real MVP of this story, Squanto. You know him from your elementary school Thanksgiving pageant as the helpful native who taught pilgrims to plant corn. But here's what Mrs. Johnson didn't tell you in 3rd grade. This guy's real name was Squantum. And he'd been through hell and back before those stinky pilgrims even showed up. Picture this, around 1614, English explorer Thomas Hunt kidnapped Squanto and about 20 other Patuxet people. Sells them into slavery in Spain. But Squanto escapes, makes it to England, learns English, and somehow gets passage back to America in 1619. When he arrives home, his entire village is dead. Wiped out by disease. So when the Mayflower shows up a year later, Squanto's literally the only guy who can communicate with these unwashed Europeans. And let me tell you, the culture shock was real. This man had been to European courts. He'd seen how they lived. He'd smelled how they lived. And he decided to make it his personal mission to teach these people basic hygiene. Imagine being Squanto. You're traumatized, alone, and suddenly responsible for babysitting a bunch of grown adults who apparently never learned that washing is good for you. Someone casually mentions that King Louis XIV of France, the King of France, had taken exactly 3 baths in his entire life. 3. Total. Ever. Squanto's reaction. Probably the 17th century equivalent of, "Are you kidding me right now?" But it gets so much worse. The European anti-bath campaign. Here's where it gets absolutely wild. Europeans didn't just avoid bathing because they were lazy. They had theories about why bathing was evil. Medieval medical wisdom claimed that hot water opened your pores, making you vulnerable to disease. Cold water? That could literally kill you by shocking your system. Public bathhouses were considered dens of sin and disease. Which, to be fair, they kind of were. When nobody understands germ theory, communal bathing gets nasty fast. The Catholic Church didn't help. They preached that cleanliness of the soul mattered more than cleanliness of the body. Some saints were literally celebrated for how much they stank. Saint Agnes reportedly never bathed after her baptism. Saint Francis of Assisi called his body "brother ass" and treated it accordingly. Being dirty was holy. Being clean was suspicious. But wait, there's more. Europeans thought that the layer of dirt and grime on their skin was actually protective. Like natural armor against disease. They'd change their shirts instead of washing their bodies, believing that clean linen absorbed the bad humors from their skin. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Native Americans were looking at this logic like, have you tried, not being disgusting? The Native American Spa Experience. For Native Americans, bathing wasn't just hygiene. It was medicine. It was spirituality. It was common sense. Every single morning, regardless of season, Native Americans would strip down and scrub themselves clean in rivers, lakes, streams, whatever water they could find. Even in winter. Ice baths were just Tuesday for these people. They had soap figured out without even having traditional soap technology. Yucca root. Crush it up, add water, instant lather. Soapberries. Nature's body wash. Wild mint. Fresh scent and antibacterial properties. Some tribes used finely ground clay for deep cleaning. Others discovered that certain plants created amazing exfoliating scrubs. They were basically running full-service spas while Europeans were convinced that dirt was a fashion statement. But here's the really advanced part, they understood that different plants had different properties. Sage for purification. Cedar for antifungal protection. Sweetgrass for aromatherapy. They'd create custom herbal baths for different purposes. Healing baths with medicinal plants. Ceremonial baths with sacred herbs. Relaxation baths with calming scents. Ancient aromatherapy. While Europeans were sniffing their own armpits and calling it character building. And the spiritual aspect? Native Americans believed that physical cleanliness was connected to spiritual purity. Clean body, clean spirit, clean relationship with nature and the divine. Europeans believed that suffering through your own stench brought you closer to God. Guess which philosophy produced healthier people? The great toilet paper innovation. Alright, we need to address the elephant in the room. Bathroom hygiene. This is where things get really medieval. Europeans in the 1600s wiped with whatever they could grab. Leaves, if they were lucky. Twigs, if they weren't. Old rags that had been used for other things. Sometimes just their hands, which they then didn't wash. The wealthy might use wool or lace. The poor used literal garbage. Meanwhile, Native Americans had engineered the corn cob solution. Think about this innovation: take dried corn cobs, remove every kernel and silk strand, let them dry until the surface is smooth and splinter-free. Boom! Reusable, effective, biodegradable toilet paper. It was so obviously superior that when Europeans learned about it, they immediately adopted it. Suddenly, corn cobs became the premium bathroom experience in colonial America. But here's the crucial difference: Native Americans washed their hands afterward. With soap. Every time. Europeans. They'd use their corn cob and then go eat dinner with the same hands. No washing. No soap. Just, hope for the best. The disease patterns practically write themselves. Medical miracles versus medieval madness. While we're talking about health innovations, let's discuss the medical gap between these cultures. Native Americans had figured out pain management. They chewed willow bark for headaches and inflammation. Modern science eventually discovered that willow bark contains salicin, which your body converts to salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirin. They invented syringes. Hollow bird bones connected to animal bladders, used to inject medicines directly into wounds or administer treatments. This is 200 years before Europeans figured out the same technology. They had specialized dentists with tools made from carved bone and antler. These practitioners could extract teeth, treat infections, and clean cavities. They made herbal toothpastes from crushed sage, mint, and thyme. They created mouthwashes from boiled herbs that actually freshened breath and fought bacteria. European dental care. A French doctor named Pierre Fauchard, supposedly the father of modern dentistry, was telling people not to clean their teeth because it was dangerous. Europeans cleaned their teeth with rags soaked in salt or soot, which was about as hygienic as it sounds. Native Americans also understood wound care, herbal antibiotics, and even basic surgery. They used clean tools, washed their hands, and understood that infection was bad. Europeans were still practicing bloodletting and using mercury as medicine. The medical knowledge gap was astronomical. The scent of success. Let's talk about natural deodorants and personal scent management. Native Americans had this figured out on multiple levels. They used cedar, sage, sweetgrass, and other plants to create natural deodorants and perfumes. These weren't just for smelling nice, though they did smell amazing. Cedar paste could mask human scent during hunting. Sage smoke purified spaces and bodies. Sweetgrass was burned as incense to keep homes fresh. They'd grind these plants into powders and pastes that they'd apply to their skin. Multi-purpose hygiene products. Deodorant, perfume, insect repellent, and spiritual purifier all in one. Europeans dealt with body odor by ignoring it, or covering it up with heavy perfumes that probably made the situation worse. Imagine the smell of weeks-old sweat mixed with rosewater and you get the idea. The contrast was so stark that some European observers wrote about how Native Americans always smelled pleasant, while European settlements could be smelled from miles away. The disease disaster. Here's where the story takes its tragic turn. All this superior hygiene, all this medical knowledge, all these healthy practices, and Native Americans still got decimated by European diseases. How does that happen? How do the cleaner, healthier people lose to the walking plague carriers? Simple, germs don't care about your hygiene routine if you've never encountered them before. Europeans brought smallpox, measles, influenza, typhus, bubonic plague, a biological weapons arsenal that Native Americans had zero immunity against. Their immune systems had never seen these diseases. Plus, European settlements were densely packed. Perfect breeding grounds for disease transmission. When you cram unwashed people together in small spaces, diseases spread like wildfire. Native American communities were typically more spread out, but once contact happened, the diseases moved through trade networks and social connections. It's like having the best armor in the world and then getting hit by a weapon that ignores armor completely. The revenge plot twist. But here's where Native Americans got the last laugh, even if they didn't know it at the time. Columbus's sailors returned to Europe with a little gift. A disease that would terrorize European high society for centuries. Syphilis. This sexually transmitted infection rampaged through European nobility like a biological revenge plot. It caused hair loss, skin lesions, and eventually madness and death. The response? Powdered wigs became fashionable to cover syphilis-induced baldness. Heavy makeup covered the skin damage. European fashion for the next 300 years was basically one giant cover-up for venereal disease. So while Europeans were calling Native Americans savages, they were literally going bald and insane from a disease they picked up in the New World. The irony is thicker than the makeup they used to hide their symptoms. The clean truth revealed. Let's step back and look at the big picture here. Europeans arrived in America, unwashed, disease-ridden, medically backwards, and hygienically challenged. They encountered Native Americans who had superior bathing practices, better dental care, more advanced medicine, natural deodorants, and innovative bathroom solutions. The Europeans' response? These people are uncivilized savages who need our help. The cognitive dissonance is breathtaking. This wasn't just cultural misunderstanding. This was propaganda. Calling clean people, dirty, and civilized people, savage, made it easier to justify taking their land and destroying their cultures. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even centuries later. The people taking daily baths weren't the primitive ones. The people with dental hygiene weren't the backwards ones. The people who washed their hands after using the bathroom weren't the unsanitary ones. They were just clean. And apparently, that was threatening enough to rewrite history. The final rinse. So the next time someone talks about civilized European colonizers bringing order and advancement to the primitive New World, remind them of this story. Remind them that the people who understood medicine were called savages by people who thought dirt was holy. Remind them that the people who bathed daily were called uncivilized by people who thought bathing was dangerous. Remind them that history is written by the winners, but archaeology doesn't lie. Science doesn't lie. And sometimes, the truth is just a soap bubble away from the surface. Thanks for watching last night's story. If you enjoyed learning about history's cleanest cover-up, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories they didn't teach you in school. Ring that notification bell, because the truth is always messier, and cleaner, than they want you to know, asterisk asterisk. Asterisk and hey, maybe go wash your hands. Squanto would be proud, asterisk.